They said the plant had already been cleared. Welded beams, stripped wires, asbestos long gone. Just another Newark shell waiting to be flattened. But the second that furnace door groaned open when the air turned thick and chemical, and that stench poured out like something still alive we knew. That building had been hiding something for a very long time. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury. And make sure no name stays forgotten. My name's Callie Mercer. I'm a detective with Newark PD's Cold Case Division. 47, born and raised in Essex County. Been working cold files for a little over 6 years now. Most of them honestly stay cold. You review the paperwork, chase a tip, maybe get a DNA hit. Usually nothing changes. But October 22nd, 2024 wasn't a usual day. That morning I was sitting in my car outside the station finishing up the last of a gas station coffee when my phone rang. Dispatch. A demo crew over in the old Emblem textile plant had found something strange. Burned mattress. Melted plastic. A school ID from 1982. Said it looked deliberate. I remember just staring through the windshield for a second. The Emblem plant had been shuttered since '89. Every cop in the city knew it as just another dead site. Cracked tile, broken glass rats the size of house cats. But I told dispatch I'd head over. The place looked the same as it always had, gray-gutted, half-buried in vines. But the smell hit me before I ever stepped inside. Not grease. Not old rot. It was sweeter, almost chemical. Like burned hair and cleaning fluid. And behind the furnace wall, the forensics team had just opened something up. A metal grate welded shut behind a boiler. What they found was a furnace chamber sealed from the inside, welded fast like someone never wanted it opened again. The inside was blackened ash coils of burned springs, bits of melted foam, and in the corner, this little square of plastic. Burned around the edges, but the photo was still clear. 4th grade school ID, Emblem Elementary, name Ethan Rains, year 1982. I'd never heard the name before, but something about his face stuck with me. Crooked smile, big glasses, looked like the kind of kid who drew dinosaurs on the margins of his notebook. Forensics bagged everything up. I called the archives that afternoon, and there he was, Ethan Rains, reported missing in July 1982, 9 years old. Last seen at the Emblem textile plant visiting his uncle on the morning shift. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, just an open delivery door and a missing boy. Police had closed the case in '84, labeled it a presumed runaway. They never searched the furnace wing. That night I pulled the original building plans from city archives. Most were blurry microfiche scans, but one of them dated June '82 showed a sealed wall behind the furnace that didn't appear in any later renovations. And something about the tile work didn't match the rest of the floor, like it had been laid down in a hurry. The next morning I was back at the site with bolt cutters and ground radar. I don't know what I expected to find, maybe an old storage pit, a forgotten crawl space. But as we cut through the second layer of steel, that same smell returned. Only stronger, foul, wet, wrong. And then we saw it. A wooden door behind the insulation. No knob, just bolts and grime, and scratched into the center so faint you'd miss it if the light hit wrong was a single word. Ethan. The bolts took longer than expected. The door wasn't just latched shut, it had been reinforced from the inside. Foam insulation packed tight into every seam. Burn marks along the brick made it clear there had been a fire here, but it hadn't spread. It was contained, purposefully. We used pry bars first, then a thermal saw to break through the welds. The moment the last hinge gave the air that poured out was thick with rot. Not just old decay. There was something human in it. Damp fabric, mold, ash. I stepped back to let the techs move in lights raised cameras ready. What we found behind that door didn't make sense right away. The chamber was about the size of a small bedroom, maybe 12 by 10. One low ceiling bulb had melted in the heat. The walls were coated with old insulation sagging and blackened near the base. In the corner was a mattress, child-sized frame gone, just the springs twisted and scorched. What was left of the sheets had a pattern on them. Dinosaurs, still visible under the grime. Beside it, a red plastic juice cup, a couple of wrappers, a broken toy. Someone had lived in that room. A child. And not for just an hour or two. This had been his space, his world. One of the forensics techs found a tray rusted metal tucked against the back wall. There were old candy wrappers inside one of them, still sealed. The expiration date was 1983. That's when I felt the shift. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a holding cell. The air in there wasn't just heavy, it was thick with years. When I looked closer, I noticed something under the insulation by the far wall. A clipboard warped from heat, but still intact inside a plastic wrap. It was an old maintenance log, handwritten mostly numbers, boiler temps, shift changes, but one entry stood out. July 18, 1982. It read, "Door resealed. No access without key." Lou said not to log anything further. I circled the name. Lou, Ethan's uncle, the man who brought him to that plant. The man who said he had no idea what happened. We already knew from the blueprints there shouldn't have been a door behind that furnace wall. Now we had proof someone had sealed it off intentionally. I took the clipboard back to the precinct. Cross-referenced the employee logs from that summer. Lou Raines had full maintenance access, overnight shifts, no oversight. Clyde Braxley, another name from the list, had boiler clearance and multiple keys. A man with no current address, fired just 3 weeks after Ethan went missing. And then one of the techs came to me with something new. Tucked behind the insulation near the furnace panel, they'd found a name, scratched directly into the concrete just a few inches above the floor. Ethan was here. Please find me. Below that, dozens of short, ragged gouges, finger length, like someone had clawed at the wall over and over again. The silence in that room was complete. Not just quiet, but hollow. I stepped out into the hallway and called Sergeant Alley. I told him to get a team with GPR ground-penetrating radar and structural authority. I wanted to know if that room went deeper, and if it did, how far. That same night, the evidence unit began cataloging the burned remains from the furnace chamber. Charred foam, scorched fibers, melted plastics. Beneath it all, they found something partially fused to the frame. A fragment of eyeglass plastic, warped and darkened, but the shape was clear. A child's lens. One of the lab techs identified the brand issued through a school voucher program used by Emblem Elementary in the early 80s. Ethan wore glasses. The following morning, I reviewed the microfiche files again. Ethan's missing persons report was thin. He'd been dropped off by his mom that morning. She was working a double shift at the hospital. Lou was supposed to keep an eye on him. Factory logs show the machines were down that day, scheduled maintenance. Most of the floor crew was off. Only a few staff on site. According to one report, a worker named Clyde Braxley had passed Ethan in the hallway around 10 a.m., said he was just exploring. The delivery entrance alarm buzzed at 10:27 a.m., flagged as a malfunction. By 11 Hosiers, Lou claimed he was looking for his nephew. By noon, police were called. But the furnace wing was never searched. Dogs hit on the canal behind the building. Investigators assumed the boy had fallen in. No body. No foul play suspected. The case went cold in 1984. For 42 years, no one had looked behind that wall. That afternoon, the radar team confirmed what I had started to suspect. Beneath the furnace bunker was a second chamber, subsurface, roughly the size of a studio apartment, concrete walls, no ventilation, no connection to the plant's foundation. We brought in jackhammers. Spent the night cutting through 6 inches of old tile and concrete. When the hole was wide enough, I went down first. The ladder creaked under my weight. The air got colder as I descended, then heavier. Like something in the space itself didn't want to be disturbed. My boots hit dirt. Not tile, not cement. The floor was packed earth. The room stretched out ahead of me, just past the reach of my flashlight. When the beam hit the back wall, I stopped breathing. On the far side was a mattress. Faded dinosaur sheets still intact. Yellowed, damp. A metal tray sat next to it, holding a few plastic wrappers and a broken action figure. Near the wall, a small wooden chair. 2 chains bolted to the floor beside it. I turned and walked back to the ladder, hand over my mouth, and climbed without speaking. Back on the surface, I called the team in. Crime scene protocol. Full forensics. Secure the site. Whatever happened to Ethan Rains? It happened down there. A few hours later, one of the officers at the front desk said someone had walked in asking to speak to me. She was around 50, pale, nervous, said her name was Sarah. She told me she'd gone to school with Ethan, same class, room 3. She was quiet at first, unsure why she'd come forward. Said she'd been watching the news, saw the factory on the screen. Something about it pulled a memory loose. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sandwich bag. Inside was a cassette tape, labeled in blue ink, for you. Ethan had given it to her the week before he disappeared. She never listened, just buried it in a box when they moved. We brought an old tape player out from storage, pressed play, static. Then a voice, small, clear. "This is Ethan Rains. I'm 9. I'm not supposed to talk in here, but I get lonely." He paused. "Then Uncle Lou says if I'm good, I get to go home in August. But I don't think he means it. The man in the apron comes when Lou leaves. He smells like paint thinner. He has gloves. I don't like the princess game." The audio cracked. Then a sound metal scraping and a second voice, low and close. "Time to go downstairs again, little guy. Don't forget our secret." Click. Silence. No one in the room moved. I wrote down one word gloves and another princess. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at Ethan's photo, pinned now beside a wall of names, shifts, maps. All of it pointed the same direction. Lou may have sealed that room, but Clyde Braxley built it. And whatever they started in that factory, it hadn't ended with a missing child. It had only just begun. I brought the cassette to the lab myself. We'd already digitized the tape Sarah Bloom gave us, but I needed to hear it again. Not the raw audio, just the filtered track cleaned up without static. I sat at the evidence desk, headphones on elbows resting on the table like I was bracing for impact. Ethan's voice came through low and uneven. He said his name. He said he was 9. He said he didn't think he'd get to go home. Then he mentioned the man in the apron. The gloves. Paint thinner. "I don't like the princess game," he whispered. And then the other voice. The one that called him little guy. Said it was time to go downstairs. Told him not to forget their secret. I listened to it twice. That was all I could do. After that, I took the tape to Ali and told him we needed to treat this as a new case. Not a supplement, not a reopened file, but a homicide. The look on his face told me he agreed, but the paperwork didn't. Technically, we had no body, no definitive cause of death. The chamber under the boiler showed signs of long-term confinement, sure, but it wasn't a confirmed burial site. The burn site in the furnace held evidence of deliberate staging, but not human remains we could verify yet. And even with the tape, even with the scratches on the wall and the fingerprints on the juice cup and the mattress and the broken toy, it wasn't enough to call it murder. Not officially. And the second we tried to escalate it to a full criminal probe, we hit the wall I've hit too many times before. Records missing, employees unaccounted for, chain of custody holes you could drive a truck through. I requested an interview with Lou Rains. No response. His number was disconnected. DMV said he'd moved to West Virginia sometime in the late 80s. No forwarding address. I called the district office to request travel funds for an out-of-state follow-up. The request sat unanswered for 2 days. In the meantime, I started pulling old Emblem employee rosters from 81 through 83. Maintenance crews, boiler techs, custodians, anyone with overnight access. Out of 24 names only, 15 still had active contact information. 5 were deceased. 2 couldn't be verified. The last 2, Lou Raines and a man named Clyde Braxley, had the most red flags. Clyde had been dismissed in August of '82, just 3 weeks after Ethan disappeared. No official reason given. Just a note. Contract concluded. No return recommended. I asked to see his full file. It had water damage. Half the pages were stuck together, but one memo stood out. Dated August 4th, 1982, handwritten in red ink. It said, "After incident in furnace wing. Braxley placed on unpaid leave. Lou signed off. No inquiry." No inquiry. I took that note to our cold case supervisor. She read it once, then looked up and said, "That's circumstantial." I said, "We've got a missing child, a sealed room, and 2 men who had keys." She said, "You've got a theory. Build it out." That night I sat in the war room alone and stared at the evidence wall. Ethan's face was in the center. Around him, dates, shift logs, diagrams, clips from blueprints. I pinned red tags on both names, Lou and Clyde. I knew in my gut they were involved, but gut doesn't hold up in court. I needed more. The next morning I drove back to the plant. Demolition had been paused indefinitely after our discovery. The site was under restricted access, but I had clearance. I brought a thermal team with me and a forensic pathologist. We started with infrared scans of the furnace floor. One of the techs flagged a heat anomaly subsurface off-center near a pipe junction, said it could be a storage cavity or a sealed chute. We traced the anomaly to a panel beneath the far wall. Looked like part of the foundation, but it had a different weld pattern. Thicker, cleaner. We brought in a torch. The metal screamed when it split. It wasn't just another utility cover. It was a reinforced hatch laid down after the rest of the plant had been built. When we pulled the slab back, we found another chamber, smaller than the last. This one had smooth walls, all concrete. No bedding, no toys, just a chair. A single wooden chair bolted to the floor. Chains on either side. Heavy, industrial. And carved into the wall behind the chair was a message. Sloppy, uneven, but clear. Ethan was here. Please find me. Below it, gouges. Dozens of them, fingernail length, scraped into the concrete like someone had tried to dig their way out. I walked out of that room and radioed in the update. Evidence of prolonged confinement. Evidence of forced restraint. Still no remains. Still no charges. Still no movement. I put in another request to travel. This time I didn't wait. I drove home, packed a bag, and left for Finch Hollow, West Virginia before the paperwork came through. I found Lou's house off a county road, number 32 Deer Hook Lane. Single-story ranch porch sagging at the corners. Rusted pickup in the driveway. I knocked. No answer. Knocked again harder. Eventually the door creaked open. Lou stood in the doorway holding a chipped mug and blinking like he didn't understand what he was looking at. I told him who I was. Showed him my badge. Said I was with Newark PD. I told him we'd found the furnace room. His eyes didn't move. I told him we found the bunker underneath. That was when he stepped back and said, "Come in." The house was stale and quiet. Calendar on the wall read October 2009. Lou sat at the kitchen table and stared at his hands. He said he'd tried to forget. Said he didn't know where Ethan ended up. Said there were parts of the plant he didn't go into. That some places were locked before he ever worked there. I asked about Clyde. His jaw went tight. Said Clyde wasn't right. Said he'd once caught him showing Ethan how to crawl through the duct system behind the boiler. Called it a game. Lou said he told him to stay away. I asked why he didn't report it. He said no one listened back then. I asked if Clyde hurt Ethan. He didn't answer. I asked if he helped cover it up. He slammed the table, said he never touched that boy, said he found the bunker 2 days after Ethan disappeared, said he saw the mattress, the jacket, the wrappers, said he panicked, thought Clyde had taken him, welded the room shut, burned the mattress, didn't want to know the truth. I sat still. Let the silence hang between us. Then I told him he'd have to come with me, that his statement was now part of a homicide investigation. He didn't argue. Back in Newark, I filed the report and sent the tape for transcription. That night, one of the forensic techs stayed behind at the plant, said she was organizing archived payroll slips. Around 9:00 p.m., she called me, said she'd found something. I drove back to the site. She brought me to a collapsed storage closet behind the HR office. Under a pile of shelving was a green binder warped from water damage. Inside were hand-drawn tables. One column was labeled ER. Dates ran from June through July 1982. Each line marked with an X. The last entry, July 21st, was circled. In the margin, someone had written, "No breakfast, no blanket today." Still cried. I turned the page. At the bottom of the sheet, one final note, underlined, thick ink. It read, "If he talks, we all burn." I didn't say anything. I just closed the binder and added it to the box. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. And the boy they buried, he hadn't been the only one. The week after we found the ledger, I stopped sleeping. Not all at once, just fewer hours each night. I'd close my eyes and hear that line from the bottom of the page. "If he talks, we all burn." I wasn't sure who we meant yet, but I knew this was bigger than Lou Raines and Clyde Braxley. And I knew whoever had been logging those daily entries wasn't just covering up a crime, they were documenting it. My board at the precinct had grown so fast, I'd started using masking tape to keep the columns from curling off the cork. Ethan's school photo sat in the middle, still pinned with the same rusted thumbtack I'd used the day we digitized the cassette. I'd listened to his voice 6 times since then, and each time it hit a little differently. Not just the fear in it, the structure. How he'd listed names, routines, phrases, almost like he thought it mattered that someone knew, like he wanted a record, even if no one was around to hear it. I kept circling the word princess. He mentioned it in the tape. So had Lou in passing. Said the man in the apron played princess games. And the log PR page after page marked with red X's. Princess room. That's what I kept calling it in my notes. I didn't say it out loud until the day we went back to rescan the second chamber, the one beneath the furnace room. The techs were pulling out a sagging layer of insulation near the far wall when one of them said quietly, "We've got bins." I walked over and saw it for myself. A crawl space. No more than 4 feet high, just deep enough to stack storage containers side by side. Plastic tubs. Tape sealed. All labeled. Some had dates. Others had shorthand codes. Most said PR. PR Volume 1, PR Vol 2. Some with add-ons, compliant needs, retake big day. I told the team to bag and tag everything. Full fingerprint scan. Isolate any exterior DNA. One of the officers flagged me down from the corner. I followed his flashlight. More insulation had fallen near the rear concrete. Underneath it, carved low into the wall, was a sentence. Ethan was here. Please find me. Below that, scratches. More than I could count. Fingernail deep, some still filled with grime. I didn't speak. Just nodded for the photographer to get it from every angle. That night I called the district attorney's office and requested a private viewing of the first few tapes. The media blackout was already in place. Nothing was going public until we confirmed what we were dealing with. We reviewed the footage in an isolated room, no sound, no one allowed to speak unless it was to tag content. Even the video stills were cataloged in separate sealed envelopes. One of the tapes, volume 5, opened with a fixed camera on a small pink room. The bed, the vanity, the baby monitor, they all matched the second chamber. Then a voice. I recognized it immediately. "Ethan." "Do I have to wear it again?" he asked. A man responded. "Yes, Ethan. Smile. You want to be good, don't you?" There was a pause, then a faint laugh. That was the end of the clip. Another tape, volume 6, showed only the room, no child. Just a man walking in, turning something off behind the camera. The angle caught a partial reflection in a wall mirror. Light glare obscured the face, but the apron was visible. So was the badge. Maintenance. EML. The FBI had already begun running facial recognition against any exposed frames. I sat down with Dana Liao, our forensic analyst, and asked her what she knew about the man in the apron. She didn't blink. Said early volumes 1 through 10 featured the same vocal profile, male mid-40s, smokers, rasp, slight southern register. They matched it to a public interview from the late 70s. Same phrasing, same cadence. It was Braxley, no doubt. And in volume 6 we had a partial badge C, Braxley Furnace Tech. That gave us our first solid visual. I exhaled through my teeth and asked the next question. "What about Lou?" Dana hesitated, then opened a folder marked volume 13. Said the voice was different in that one. Deeper, slower, more deliberate. The man behind the camera had referred to the boy by a nickname. Sparkplug. Lou told me once that's what he used to call Ethan when he was little. We had him on tape. I didn't wait for counsel. I brought Lou into interview room 4 and laid out the still frames. In one, Ethan sat cross-legged on the mattress. In the next, a man's silhouette appeared in the corner. I slid the images across the table. Lou didn't look down. I told him the date on the tape weeks before Ethan's last known sighting. I told him we had audio, that it was his voice. He swallowed hard. Said he didn't touch the boy. Said he tried to stop it. Said Clyde told him it was blackmail footage. Said if he ever talked, they'd blame him. That Clyde kept copies, that he took them with him. That's why Lou welded the room shut, to end it. But he never said the words out loud, not until I did. You documented your nephew's abuse. He lowered his head, whispered I didn't protect him. I let the silence sit. Then I told him he was being charged. That night I walked the precinct halls until well after midnight. No one else was around except the janitorial crew and 2 rookies filling out DUI paperwork. I stopped outside the evidence room and looked through the glass. Rows of bins, audio reels, boxes labeled Princess Room. It didn't feel like a solved case. It felt like something still unfinished. And in the middle of it all was Ethan quiet, careful, forgotten for 42 years. I opened my notebook and wrote down one question. Not who hurt him. We knew that now. But who else knew? And why no one ever said a word? I didn't know it yet, but by morning the answer would come in the form of a cabin floorboard in rural Pennsylvania and a box that was never supposed to be opened. I got the call just before noon. It was Deputy Nolan from Carbon County, Pennsylvania. Said a hunting cabin had been repossessed in a foreclosure settlement outside of Nesquehoning, and the new owner found something strange under a floorboard in the back room. "We think it's connected to your case," he said. I asked how. He hesitated, then said, "There's a box labeled Princess Room. Copies." That was all I needed. I was in the car within the hour. It was a 5-hour drive from Newark. I took it in silence. The trees started thickening the closer I got, pine and maple giving way to long stretches of birch. The road narrowed, then turned to gravel. By the time I pulled up, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the cabin's front porch. Nolan met me at the edge of the driveway and led me inside without much talk. The floorboard had already been removed. It was a corner panel near the back wall under what used to be a bunk bed. Someone had pried it up with care, not forced clean edges, notched with a chisel. Underneath was a compartment no deeper than a shoebox. Inside a metal case. dented, taped, sealed tight. When we opened it, the smell hit first. Old fabric and mildew. Inside were 6 VHS tapes each wrapped in wax paper and a manila folder tucked beneath them. The folder had no label, just a red stamp on the corner, "Do not file." The handwriting on the cover matched the notes from the furnace logs. Same pressure, same slant. It was Clyde Braxley's. I put on gloves and opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of what looked like handwritten instructions, routine logs, symbols. At the top of each page was a date summer of '82. Most had a grid layout. PR1 compliant, PR2 unfit, meal denied. One entry said rewarded 10 mins upstairs. Another said no eye contact. Subject defiant. One page was almost entirely blacked out except for a note at the bottom. All footage backed up. Vault location verified. See ledger key. I flagged that line and asked Nolan if anything else had been recovered. He nodded and opened a separate evidence box. Inside was a small black notebook, worn leather cover snap closure, maybe 3 inches tall. The ledger. Inside, coded initials, dates, and what looked like deposit amounts, but not bank figures. These were labeled by first names and numbers. Terry 800, Jules 1200. Father full sum paid. I read it twice, then looked up and said, "This isn't a journal. It's a payment record." Nolan stayed quiet, but the meaning was clear. These weren't just crimes of opportunity. They were transactions, arranged, scheduled. And according to that notebook, there were more children. A lot more. One name stood out. Eli Summer, 1981, didn't return. That was the only one with a star next to it. I asked Nolan if he could run a local missing persons check for a boy named Eli, age 8 to 10, reported missing around '81. He came back 20 minutes later with a single match, Eli Durham, age 9, last seen leaving Bible camp in Allentown. Never made it home. His file had been cold for 43 years. I packed up the tapes and ledger and called for immediate transfer to our evidence lab. Back in Newark, I didn't go home. I went straight to the station, logged the box, and started reviewing the tapes. I only watched one. PR7. It opened with a shot of a dim room. Different setup from the plant. No insulation, just plywood walls and a bare bulb swinging from the ceiling. The child in the frame wasn't Ethan. This boy had darker hair, smaller build. He didn't speak. The man behind the camera said, "Your mom said you could stay here. Just for the week." The boy nodded slowly. Then he was handed a plastic tiara. The same tiara we found in the second chamber, the same one seen in the earlier tapes. The camera zoomed in slightly, then cut to black. I filed that reel under restricted evidence and flagged it for federal intake. I called Dana and told her to isolate any overlapping voice samples from this tape and Ethan's. She confirmed it wasn't Clyde. Not Lou either. A third man. Unknown. I asked if we had any prints from the cabin tapes. She said yes, 2 sets. One matched Clyde. The other was still running through the system. I sat in my car for almost an hour after that. The pieces were starting to take shape, but nothing about them felt whole. We had a chamber. We had victims. We had pay logs, schedules, routines. But we still didn't have the name of the man behind it all. The one who called himself father. The one who never showed his face. That weekend, I requested access to the original HR files from the emblem plant. Not just digital scans, physical records. I wanted the paper trail. The files came from a storage facility outside Trenton. Most were water damaged, but one folder survived intact employee training and safety certification logs, 1980 to 1983. Inside were sign-in sheets, class rosters, supervisor notes. One note dated June 1982 listed a special orientation for overnight workers with a handwritten addendum, new rotation, assigned by father, effective immediately. That was the first time the word appeared in any official document. Father. No name, no signature, just a title. By Tuesday, the unidentified fingerprint came back. Partial match. Retired state employee. Former fire marshal. Name Kenneth Beale. He'd worked inspections for over 20 years. Retired in '84. Last known address deceased. Heart failure. No surviving family. But his personnel file listed a direct supervisor. Director of Municipal Oversight Northern Region. I cross-referenced the name. Same handwriting as the emblem logs. Same signature as the ledger notes. The man behind the curtain wasn't Clyde or Lou. It was the one who made sure the doors stayed closed and the paperwork stayed buried. I wrote his name down, circled it twice, and drew a line straight back to the top of the ledger. It was the first time in the case I felt something snap into place, not like a conclusion, but like a lock turning. One box had opened and another one had just sealed shut. I didn't know how deep it went yet. But now I had a pattern. I had names. And somewhere, if I could just find it, there had to be a list. A full one. Not just of the men who ran the room, but of the children who never came home. I waited until the building was empty. Midnight, maybe a little after. The third floor of City Records goes quiet after hours. No janitors, no clerks, just motion-activated lights and the hum of the old HVAC. I knew what I was looking for. Zoning ledgers from 1981 through 1985. Not the ones on the system, those were redacted years ago. I needed the backups. Paper logs. Originals. The ones still stored in the basement archive behind the fire stairwell. I swiped my access card and slipped inside flashlight in one hand, bolt cutter in the other. The lock on the storage cage was rusted shut, but the chain gave with one good snap. Inside, row after row of banker boxes, decades of property files, municipal blueprints, and compliance slips no one had touched in years. I found the right section and started pulling boxes down one at a time. Most were water-damaged pages fused together or eaten at the corners, but one box near the bottom was intact. EML, Furnace Expansion, 82. I opened the file and scanned the documents under the flashlight. Blueprint revisions, HVAC rerouting, emergency exit codes. Then I found it a single-page amendment titled Vault 2 Compliance Notes, authorized by FM. There was no signature, just initials FM, and a list of line items AC reroute complete. Insulation installed, observation feed tested. At the bottom, a handwritten note, maintain silence until transfer final, no external entry permitted, use south stairwell only. I circled that line, then flipped to the next page. Stapled to it was a narrow receipt from an equipment supplier. Date, July 12, 1982. Purchase locking restraints. 12 count. Industrial grade. Delivered to Emblem Plant. Signed Kenneth Beale. I took photos of everything, returned the files exactly as I found them, and slipped out through the side exit. No cameras down there. Just the motion sensors I'd disabled before heading in. By the time I reached my car, the heat had broken into that sticky, early morning chill. I sat in the driver's seat for a long minute before calling Dana. I told her I had proof Beale authorized the expansion, that he knew about the second chamber. She didn't sound surprised. Just tired. Said she'd meet me at the plant by 8. When I got there, the team was already unpacking another crate, this one recovered from the central duct. It had been wedged behind a rusted air intake sealed in plastic and foil. Inside, 2 more tapes, a stack of index cards, and a disposable camera, undeveloped. We tagged the box and moved it to evidence. The index cards were numbered. Most listed child names, first names only, with dates, age estimates, and a final column labeled Final Dispo. Some said returned. Others said unfit. 3 said failed. One card had no name, just a number E072182. Ethan's. The date matched. I asked Dana to run prints on the cards. She nodded and slipped on gloves, then paused. One of the cards was blank on the front but had a note scrawled across the back. Don't forget the basement. I asked which tape it was grouped with. She flipped the label PR-13. I wrote it down, circled it twice. That was the next one we reviewed. The footage was darker than the rest. Grainy, distorted around the edges, but still audible. A child's voice, older this time, said, "Why's there no window?" A man off camera responded, "Because sunlight makes them forget." Then silence. Shuffling. A match flared. Someone laughed. Then another voice. Familiar, but wrong. Not Clyde. Not Lou. Not Kenneth. Higher pitched. Measured. He said, "No more talking. You've had your hour." The screen cut to static. Dana rewound it 3 times. Same audio, same cut. Then she played it frame by frame. 1 second before the video ended, there was a flash barely visible. A calendar on the back wall, August 1982, and pinned beneath it, a Polaroid. The photo showed 3 children seated in a row, eyes down. The middle child was Ethan. The others I didn't recognize, not yet. We digitized the image, enhanced it, and ran facial recognition on all 3. Ethan was confirmed. The girl on the left matched no known records. The boy on the right partial match. Possible ID Daniel Roy, missing from Harrisburg, summer of '82. That name wasn't in any ledger. No card, no tape log. I called Harrisburg PD and requested access to Daniel's case file. The responding officer said the records had been purged in the early 2000s, categorized as runaway, presumed deceased. I asked if there was a next of kin. He said the mother died in '91. No siblings, no father on record. I asked if any of Daniel's belongings had ever been recovered. He paused. Said there was a backpack found near the train tracks, but no forensic data was ever processed. I requested a chain of custody record. He said there wasn't one. I hung up, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the screen. There were more children. We knew that now. But there were also more failures. More names erased. I printed the calendar frame and took it to Lou. He was being held pending indictment at the county detention center. I didn't show him the tape, just the Polaroid. I pointed to the boy on the right and asked, "Do you know who this is?" Lou didn't look up at first. Then he said, "They called him Mitch." I asked, "Was that his name?" Lou shrugged. "Might have been. Clyde didn't like real names, said it made things harder. I asked if Mitch ever got out. Lou looked down, said he got sick. They left him down there 2 nights before they opened the chute." I asked what chute. He said the south boiler hatch. That's where they put the ones that couldn't finish. I didn't speak. I just stood, walked out, and told the guard we were done. The next morning I returned to the plant. I brought a forensic crew and asked them to focus on the south quadrant. We traced every vent, every pipe, every passage that led downward. Around midday, one of the techs called me over. She'd found something beneath a steel hatch we hadn't fully opened, partially collapsed, sealed with old mortar. We cleared it layer by layer. Underneath was a narrow shaft 8 feet deep, lined in soot. At the bottom, fragments. Bone. Not a full skeleton, just pieces. A femur. Ribs. Smaller than adult. Not fresh. A scrap of cloth beside it, blue faded, patterned with stars. The same fabric Ethan had been wearing in one of the tapes. I didn't need confirmation. I knew what we were looking at. That night I sat in my car outside the plant until the parking lot emptied. I didn't start the engine, just stared at the building. Every window dark, every door sealed, and still it felt like something in there was waiting to be found. We'd cracked the concrete. We'd pulled back the layers. But there was one thing we still hadn't touched. The name etched into every ledger. The voice behind the curtain, the one they called Father. And 2 days later, when a man came forward with a torn photo and a shaking hand, I realized he hadn't vanished. He'd just changed his name. He came into the station just after 3 p.m., walked up to the front desk and asked to speak with the lead investigator on the emblem case. Said his name was Howard Kent. He looked to be in his late 70s, carried himself like someone who'd spent years trying not to be noticed, shoulders drawn and eyes low. But he had a folder clutched to his chest, and when I came out to meet him, he didn't waste time. "I think I know who your father is," he said, voice dry like it hurt to speak. He followed me into interview room C and laid the folder on the table without sitting down. I worked city engineering back in '82. I signed off on the original furnace permit. I didn't know what it was for. Not then. But I saw something. Something I never forgot. Inside the folder were 2 photographs. One showed a narrow hallway, cinder block walls, a steel door at the end. The other was a portrait taken at a retirement ceremony. 8 men lined up in front of a banner. Second from the left was Clyde Braxley. At the center, smiling just slightly, stood a man with thinning hair and a pale blue suit. Howard tapped his finger against the man's chest. "That's your father," he said. "That's Franklin Marlowe." I froze. We'd seen those initials FM on the vault compliance forms, on the zoning override for the ductwork. I asked Howard how he knew. He said Marlowe used to call in favors, skipped inspections. He kept things quiet, Howard said. Paid people off when he had to, but he didn't talk much. Never raised his voice, never cursed, just made things happen. I ran Marlowe's name through every state and federal registry we had. Nothing. No outstanding warrants, no known aliases. According to DMV records, he'd been declared deceased in 1986. Heart failure. Same year the chamber was sealed. But something didn't sit right. I called in a request for his death certificate and autopsy report. It took 2 days. When the files came through, I knew we had him. The coroner's report had been signed by Kenneth Beale, and the body listed as Franklin Marlowe had never been fingerprinted. No dental match, no confirming ID, just a closed casket and a burial under a false name, William Kent, Howard's brother. We exhumed the body within the week. DNA confirmed it wasn't Marlowe, wasn't anyone in the state system. Just a man with no name, buried under someone else's. That same afternoon, we found the real Marlowe, or what was left of him. A financial trace led us to an assisted living facility in upstate New York. He was living under the name Richard Fulton. No driver's license, no digital trail, just a post office box, a Medicare account, and a long-standing security deposit on a private room paid in cash every 6 months. When we showed up with a warrant, he didn't run. Didn't even look surprised. Just looked up from his chair and said, "It's over, isn't it?" We brought him in for questioning. He was frail, early 90s by then, but his voice still carried that same flat weight. I asked if he was Franklin Marlowe. He nodded. I asked if he ran the emblem chamber. He said I built it. He didn't deny anything. Not the tapes, not the ledgers, not the children. When I asked why, he only said there was a system. The world forgets children like that. We gave them order. I felt sick. He never called them victims, never said their names. Just numbers, roles. Some were gifted, he said. Some weren't ready. But they all had a place. We charged him with 37 counts of unlawful imprisonment, endangerment, and conspiracy. The full extent of the abuse couldn't be proven. Too much had decayed. Too many files were lost, but the ledgers held. The tapes held. And so did his words. We petitioned the court to unseal 26 cold cases that matched the dates and regions listed in the emblem intake logs. Of those, 10 families came forward and confirmed details only Marlowe could have known. One mother brought in her son's report card, the last thing she'd mailed before he vanished. It had been mentioned in one of the reward entries, sticker book, and report card delivered. Marlowe was deemed unfit to stand full trial, placed under state custody, confined to a high-security geriatric facility. No visitors, no media, no closure, just silence. But before he was transferred, I had one more moment with him. I asked if Ethan was still alive when the chamber was sealed. He looked at me blank and tired, then said, Some children know how to disappear better than others. That was all he gave me. I walked out without another word. The next week, we found a sealed drawer at Marlowe's apartment. Inside was a tape labeled "Retired, PR Final." No date, no time code, just a child's drawing taped to the cover, a house, a tree, a small figure in the window. When we played the tape, there was no chamber, no voices, just static. Then music, a lullaby faint and warbled. And over it a boy's voice whispered something I couldn't quite make out. Dana enhanced the audio, played it again. This time it was clear. If you're hearing this, I made it. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the shoot. The card with Ethan's number, the one that never said failed, it said transferred. But to where? And by who? That last tape wasn't proof. Not legally, not even logistically. But it was something else. A breath. A possibility. And in a case full of dark certainties, it was the first time I felt like maybe, just maybe not, everything had been buried. The final arrests came on a Wednesday. It wasn't dramatic. No raids, no headlines. Just a series of quiet visits and unmarked vehicles pulling into aging driveways. One by one, they were picked up Kenneth Beale, already under house monitoring, Lou Parmer, who'd cut a plea deal in exchange for testimony, and finally, Dana and I flew to rural Tennessee to pick up Clyde Braxley, who'd been living under a false name in a mobile home outside Pigeon Forge. He didn't resist, just opened the screen door and said, "It's about time." We brought them all back under sealed federal warrants. Charges ranged from conspiracy to commit child endangerment to unlawful imprisonment with enhancements due to the number of victims and length of time concealed. Most of the evidence was circumstantial, nothing recent, no living witnesses we could confirm, but between the tapes, the recovered bones, and the physical layout of the emblem plant, the grand jury didn't hesitate. Indictments were handed down within 72 hours. The courtroom was plain. Federal building. No press allowed, just family members of victims and legal counsel. I sat in the back row, file open in my lap, listening. Marlowe wasn't there. Too frail. His statement had been pre-recorded. He didn't admit guilt, not directly, but he said just enough to seal it. I oversaw transitions he'd said. I ensured order was maintained. The phrase stuck with me, like he was describing a school or a train station, like the children weren't real. But what struck me more than the words was the way no one in that video not once said the name Ethan, as if his absence had become the case's silence. We filed a supplemental report requesting Ethan's card be reclassified from transferred to survivor, status unknown. The request was granted. It didn't change much, but it meant something to me. Dana stepped down from the investigation after that, said she was going to teach full-time. Something in her had shifted. She still smiled, still showed up when needed, but the way she looked at evidence, she just didn't want to keep carrying it. I understood. I stayed on through the sentencing hearings. Beale was given 22 years with parole unlikely before 2040. Lou got 14 reduced for cooperation. Clyde died in custody before his trial began. Complications from a stroke. The state closed the emblem plant for good. Barriers went up around the foundation. Eventually, they planned to turn the site into a memorial garden, but as of the last update, nothing had been built. Too much debate over the plaque. Too many names missing. Too many names never known. We returned all physical evidence to the archive tapes, photos, clothing fragments. The only item we kept separate was the final tape, the one with the voice that said I made it. Dana and I logged it under independent voice. Source undetermined. But we both knew what it really was. A message. A sign. Not of salvation maybe, but survival. The audio text said it could have been manipulated, spliced in. But I'd heard enough fear on those other tapes to know the difference. This voice didn't sound scared. It sounded defiant. Small but clear. Like whoever said it was trying to leave a mark no one could erase. In the weeks that followed, families started reaching out. some to thank us, some just to ask questions we couldn't answer. One woman whose daughter disappeared in 1985 wrote a letter that said, "Even if she wasn't there, you made them answer." I kept that one, pinned it inside the back of my case binder. The only thing I didn't keep was the photo. The one of Ethan is the Polaroid. That stayed with the cold case division filed under ongoing leads. Every so often I'd check the log to see if anyone had added to it. They hadn't. Until one afternoon in late August when a note appeared under the Unverified Tips tab. No return address, no timestamp. Just a scanned message handwritten, "The boy with the stars is safe." Below that was a series of coordinates. Not an address, just raw GPS. I entered them manually. They pointed to a stretch of wooded land in Montana near the border of a wildlife reserve. No structures, no roads. Just trees, sky, and distance. I sent the coordinates to field agents in the region marked Low Priority Inquiry. I didn't expect much. These cases attract noise attention seekers, copycats, people with broken minds looking to insert themselves into something bigger. But part of me hesitated before closing the file. There was something about the handwriting, the slope of the letters, the way the lowercase t's curved just slightly left. I remembered them from the intake cards, the ones that labeled each child. Whoever wrote this had been part of it. I didn't tell Dana, not yet. She needed her distance, but I logged the note into the official record flagged for future review. It didn't change the case status, didn't unlock anything new, but it meant we weren't finished. That somewhere out there, maybe buried, maybe breathing, was one last name unaccounted for. And if I'd learned anything from this case, it was that silence doesn't always mean gone. Sometimes it just means waiting. It's been 3 years since we closed the emblem case. 3 years since we unearthed the tapes, the names, the silence behind that steel vault door. In that time, the investigation officially ended. The court filings were sealed. The site was filled in. Grass started growing over the foundation last fall, and a local artist donated a granite bench with no inscription, just a single metal tag embedded underneath, stamped with the number 43. We still don't know if that's how many there were, but we know it's not fewer. Every now and then I get a message, someone who thinks they saw Ethan, someone who found a postcard with the stars or remembers a boy who used to hum that same melody from the tape. I used to chase them, used to log every detail, every half-remembered encounter. But lately, I just listen, write the date, the name, the city, file it away. Not because I've given up, but because not every answer comes in the form of proof. Some come as echoes, as traces that keep someone from being erased. Dana and I still talk. She sent a photo last winter her students lined up outside the courthouse on a field trip pointing at the building where the trial happened. She said they asked about the case. She didn't tell them everything, just that it mattered. That it was one of those rare moments when something buried deep was brought to light. I think that's enough. There are still things I don't understand. Why they built it in that town. Why no one ever came forward sooner. Why so many people saw so little. But I've stopped trying to hold it all in one hand. Some truths stretch beyond what we're built to carry alone. What I do know is this: when you walk through a place like that, when you hear those voices, when you feel what was done there, you don't leave unchanged. You learn to listen differently, to pay attention to what isn't said. I went back to the site once. Quiet day, overcast. The grass was still thin in patches, and you could see where the soil hadn't quite settled over the old chute entrance. I brought a candle and a photo Ethan's Polaroid. I didn't leave it, just held it for a while. Let the wind pass through. No words, no ceremony. Just stood there, thinking about the ones who never got out, and the one who might have. I don't know where Ethan is. I don't know if he's alive. But I know he was more than a number, more than a card, more than whatever role they tried to assign him. And somewhere, maybe in some quiet pocket of the world, he knows that someone is still looking, still remembering, still saying his name. If this story stayed with you, consider sharing it. Not for views, not for numbers, but so that no name, no child is ever written off as forgotten. Because in the end, the only thing stronger than what was hidden is what we choose to remember.